In the galaxy, humans were nothing special. They were small compared to the giant warriors of the outer planets. They were fragile compared to the scaled and armored species of the deep worlds. They had no telepathy, no natural weapons, no glowing skin, no wings, no claws. Most aliens called them average, weak, and sometimes even unnecessary. On the massive station called Syndral Hub, thousands of species lived together. It was the heart of trade, travel, and politics. Shops sold goods from hundreds of planets, ships docked every hour, and voices of 100 tongues filled the air. Here, at the very edge of the trade district, worked a human named Daniel. Daniel was quiet. He carried boxes, cleaned tables, and fixed small machines. Most did not even know his name. To aliens, he was just another weak human earning credits for survival. He never argued, never showed off, never raised his voice. He just worked, bowed politely, and disappeared into the background. One day, something happened that changed everything. The great food systems of the station, the machines that produced meals for every species, suddenly broke. For decades, no one had cooked food by hand. Machines prepared all meals, fast, simple, and safe. But now, the endless lines of aliens waited for hours, angry and hungry. Restaurants closed, fights broke out, and the smell of burned circuits filled the air. In the corner of the chaos, Daniel stood quietly. He listened to the complaints, the shouts, the panic. No food meant no peace. No food meant riots. And yet, Daniel's face remained calm. Finally, someone shouted at him, "You, human, do something useful." Daniel looked up, his voice soft but steady. "I can cook," he said. The words made the aliens laugh. Cook. What did that even mean? Cooking was something from ancient history. Before machines, before perfect nutrition cubes, no one was time mixing, heating, or tasting anymore. Food was only fuel, nothing more. A tall insectoid alien clicked its mandibles. "You mean you will touch raw ingredients with your hands? That is disgusting." A scaled reptilian scoffed. "Cooking is for primitives. Do you humans still play with fire?" Others chuckled and shook their heads, but Daniel did not argue. He only repeated, "I can cook." His eyes were calm, his hands steady, his voice unshaken. Something in the way he spoke made a few aliens stop laughing. "Show us, human," one said with a sneer. "Show us this, cooking." So Daniel was given a small corner of a broken restaurant. The machines were down, but the storerooms still had supplies. Vegetables from green worlds, meat cubes from biofarms, spices that were rarely used. Daniel rolled up his sleeves, washed his hands, and began. Aliens gathered to watch, more curious than respectful. He lit a flame, and they gasped. Blue fire danced under a metal pan. To them, it was reckless, dangerous, unnecessary. But Daniel's face glowed calm in the light. He cut vegetables slowly, with care. He stirred them with oil and spices. A strange sound filled the air, sizzling. And then came the smell, a warm, rich, living aroma that drifted across the room. Aliens sniffed the air, blinking in confusion. Their antennae twitched, their scales shivered, their feathers lifted. They had never smelled anything like it. "What is this?" whispered one. "Why does it make my chest feel warm?" asked another. The mocking laughter grew silent, replaced by uneasy awe. Daniel added more spices, letting the smell grow stronger. He hummed softly as he worked, like a man remembering home. Every slice, every stir, every movement was gentle and careful. It was not just food, it was art, it was memory, it was love. The aliens leaned closer, unable to pull away. Some felt hunger in a way he had never known before, not the hunger of empty stomachs, but the hunger of the soul. At last, Daniel placed the food on a table. Simple plates, simple colors, nothing like the machine meals they knew. He bowed his head and said, "Try it." The first alien, a feathered being with 4 eyes, lifted a spoon with shaking claws. It tasted, and then froze. Its body trembled, its eyes widened, tears formed in the corners of its eyes. This is," it whispered. But no words came. One by one, others tasted. One gasped, one laughed, one began to cry. Every flavor was new, sharp, sweet, warm, deep. It touched not just their tongues, but their hearts. Memories of family, of safety, of home filled their minds. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy remembered what food could be, and at the center of it all stood Daniel, the quiet human, the one everyone had ignored, the one who simply said, "I can cook." No one laughed anymore. The room was silent except for the sound of their beating hearts, and in that silence, the galaxy began to change. The room was filled with silence. Plates of food rested on the table, steam rising slowly into the air. The smell spread through the crowd like a wave, pulling every nose closer. Some aliens twitched nervously, some licked their lips without understanding why, and some stood frozen, afraid to believe that this simple human had created such a thing. Daniel waited, his hands calm at his sides. He did not beg them to eat, he did not boast, he only said in a quiet voice, "Try it." The first alien to step forward was a Valren, a bird-like being with 4 black eyes and feathers that shimmered like silver. Valrens were known for their pride and sharp tongues, but this one was trembling as it lifted the spoon. The metal shook in its claw, clinking softly against the plate. It took a bite. The room held its breath. Then, the Valren froze. Its eyes went wide, its feathers lifted high, and its wings shivered. For a long moment, it said nothing. Then a small sound escaped its throat. A sound no one had ever heard from a Valren before. It was laughter, but soft, trembling, almost like crying. This is warm," it whispered, voice breaking. "This is alive." The crowd gasped. Some laughed nervously, some frowned. Others leaned forward, desperate to understand. A scaled Tragan warrior pushed to the front. Its body was covered in green armor-like skin, its teeth sharp, its voice deep like thunder. The Tragans were feared across the galaxy, their armies unstoppable, their hearts cold. Yet this warrior took a bite and dropped its weapon to the floor. It closed its eyes and exhaled, the sound like a sigh of relief after 1,000 battles. "I taste peace," the warrior murmured, its claws trembling. "I had forgotten this feeling." Now the crowd pushed closer, dozens of species, tall and small, insect and mammal, scaled and feathered. They each wanted to try. Daniel served them one by one, never rushing, always gentle. And one by one, the impossible happened. A Jalorian, whose body was made of liquid crystal, ate and suddenly changed color, glowing with brilliant shades of gold. A Uran, a telepath who always spoke in cold voices of the mind, took a spoonful and for the first time spoke with its real mouth, whispering aloud, "Home." Even the insectoid who had mocked Daniel earlier fell to its knees after the first bite, unable to speak at all. The room became a storm of emotion. Some aliens laughed loudly, unable to contain the joy in their chest. Some cried openly, tears dropping onto the floor. Others stood in silence, their eyes filled with something long lost. Hope. It was not just taste. It was memory. It was connection. Every bite carried more than flavor. It carried meaning. Daniel watched them quietly, his expression calm, but his eyes carried a hidden weight. He knew this was only the beginning. Humans had always known food was more than survival. Food was family. Food was comfort. Food was love. And now the galaxy was remembering. But among the crowd, not everyone was joyful. In the shadows, a group of aliens whispered together. "These feelings are dangerous," one hissed. "If food can control hearts, it can control armies," another growled. "Machines are safe. Machines never cause this chaos. This human, he is a threat." Still, the majority did not hear those words. They were too lost in the miracle of flavor. They begged Daniel for more, reaching with desperate hands. He nodded and continued to cook. The fire blazed, the pan sizzled, and the aroma grew stronger. The station's security officers, who had arrived ready to break up a fight, stopped in their tracks. One sniffed the air and suddenly remembered the soup his mother used to make before he joined the guard. Another, a hard-faced officer from a cold moon, felt tears on her cheeks without knowing why. Even they stayed, waiting for their turn. The word spread fast. What began as a small corner crowd became a flood of bodies. Aliens from every level of the station hurried toward the broken restaurant. They came with curiosity, with hunger, with disbelief, and every one of them left changed. By the end of the day, thousands had tasted. The entire district buzzed with whispers. The human can cook. The flavor changes you. It makes you remember things you didn't know you had forgotten. Some called it a miracle. Some called it dangerous. Some simply could not explain it. As Daniel cleaned his tools, the station lights dimming into artificial night, he looked out at the city of stars through the window. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He only whispered to himself, "This is only the first step," because he knew deep inside that the galaxy would not stay quiet. This was not just food anymore. It was power. And power always draws eyes. The last scene of that night was a silent one. In the distance, far above the shining station, a warship turned its sensors toward the Ho. Inside that warship, a voice spoke in the dark. "Find the human. Bring him to us." And so, while aliens celebrated their first taste of human cooking, a storm was already on its way. The station had never been so alive. In one single day, Daniel the human had gone from a quiet shadow to the center of every conversation. The words spread faster than ships could travel. The human cooks. The human makes food that touches the heart. The human can change you. Aliens who tasted his meals could not stop speaking about them. They told stories of tears, laughter, old memories, and forgotten joys. Some said the food healed sadness. Others swore it made them feel courage. It was as if Daniel's cooking unlocked doors inside their souls, doors that had been closed for centuries, but while the common people celebrated, the powerful ones did not. The Galactic Trade Guild, which controlled food machines across half the stars, saw their profit threatened. The military councils saw danger. If food could stir such emotions, then armies could be swayed, wars could be started or ended with a single meal. Religions whispered that Daniel's gift might challenge their gods, for in a galaxy where food was only fuel, his cooking was beginning to look like magic. Daniel, however, did not seek power. Each day he worked quietly in the same broken restaurant corner. He cooked simple meals, bread, soup, roasted meats, fried vegetables. He smiled softly at children, bowed politely to guards, listened to stories from strangers. He did not realize that spies were already watching him. From the shadows of the station, eyes glowed. Agents sent by guilds, councils, and even warlords stood in the crowd pretending to eat. They recorded everything. They sent messages across the stars. The human's food can break control. This cannot be allowed to spread. We must act before it is too late. One evening, Daniel returned to his small room in the lower district. The corridor was quiet, the hum of machines faint in the walls. He placed his tools on the table, wiped his hands, and closed his eyes. But then he felt it. A chill. The kind of silence that is not natural. He opened his eyes, and in the corner of the room stood a figure cloaked in shadows. "You should stop," the figure said, its voice low, alien, mechanical. Daniel did not move. "Stop what?" he asked, his tone calm. "Stop cooking," the figure hissed. "The galaxy does not need your flavor. It needs order. Machines bring order. You bring chaos." Daniel said nothing. The figure stepped closer, its eyes glowing red. "Your meals make people feel," it continued. "When people feel, they rebel. When people feel, they do not obey. Do you understand, human? Your gift is dangerous." Still, Daniel's face remained calm. Finally, he answered in a soft voice, "Food is not a weapon. It is care. It is life." The figure leaned closer, its voice sharp like a blade. "To you, maybe, but to others, it is power, and power will always be taken." Then the shadow was gone, leaving the room empty and cold. The next morning, Daniel cooked again, but this time, when the crowd arrived, they noticed soldiers watching from the edges. Their armor gleamed under the lights, their weapons ready. The aliens eating grew nervous. Some whispered, "Why are they here?" Others muttered, "Is the human in trouble?" Daniel continued to cook, acting as if nothing had changed. He served children first, then elders, then warriors. He smiled softly, though his eyes flickered with quiet thought. He knew now that the storm was growing. Later that night, as he cleaned the pans, a young alien girl approached him. Her eyes were wide, her voice small. "Mister, my father has not smiled in years. Today, when he ate your soup, he smiled. Please, do not stop cooking." Daniel bent down and patted her head gently. "I won't," he promised. But deep inside, he wondered how long he would keep that promise. Across the galaxy, leaders gathered in secret chambers. They watched recordings of aliens crying, laughing, and kneeling after eating human food. They argued, shouted, and feared. "This human is dangerous," one leader growled. "We should arrest him, study him, maybe remove him," another suggested. But one voice, calm and sharp, silenced them all. "No," it said, "we cannot destroy him yet. We must control him. If we own the cook, we own the galaxy." And so, plans were made. Assassins sharpened their blades, kidnappers prepared their ships, guild masters sent bribes and spies. The hunt for Daniel had begun. Meanwhile, in the broken little restaurant, Daniel stirred a pot of soup as if nothing in the galaxy had changed. The fire burned softly, the smell rose into the air, and tired aliens lined up with hope in their eyes. But above them, unseen, invisible warships circled. Their commanders whispered, "Soon, the human will be ours." The galaxy did not yet know it, but a dangerous secret had been born, and that secret was hidden inside every bite of food Daniel cooked. The whispers about the human had grown too loud. Every corner of the station buzzed with stories of Daniel's cooking. Merchants claimed his meals healed sadness. Soldiers swore his food gave courage, and children spoke of flavors that felt like dreams. But in the upper halls of the station, not everyone was pleased. The Guild of Culinary Artisans had ruled food culture for centuries. Though cooking was long gone, the guild had chefs who programmed the machines, perfected nutrient cubes, and sold luxury flavors. They were powerful, wealthy, and proud, and now a single quiet human had made them look like frauds. It did not take long before they sent their champion. His name was Chef Vorik, a towering alien with 6 arms, each hand gloved in silver. He wore robes lined with jewels, his head crowned with golden horns. Vorik was known as the Taste King of the Core Worlds, and he did not come to taste, he came to destroy. The announcement spread like wildfire. A duel of food. The human versus the guild's champion. Cooking against machine perfection. Crowds poured into the great hall of the station, a place where usually politics were debated. Now it had been transformed into an arena. Gleaming tables stood in the center. One side with Daniel's simple tools, knives, pans, and a fire. The other side with Vorik's shining machines, humming with power and precision. Daniel arrived quietly, carrying only a small bag of ingredients. He wore no crown, no jewels, no robes, only a simple apron. The audience laughed when they saw him. "That small human will be crushed," some sneered. "Vorik will turn him into ash." Others laughed. But when Daniel set his tools on the table, his hands were steady, his eyes calm, his breath even. Vorik looked at him and smiled cruelly. "You think your primitive fire and knives can challenge me? I have flavors designed by stars elves, perfection in every molecule." Daniel only nodded, replying softly, "Let's cook." The duel began. Vorik's machines whirred to life, slicing, boiling, steaming all at once. Colors of bright blue and green lit up as exotic chemicals were poured into glowing bowls. The crowd gasped at the spectacle. It looked like magic. Daniel, however, moved slowly. He cut vegetables with care. He lit his flame, the blue fire flickering softly. The sizzle of onions and spices filled the hall. At first, the crowd laughed. "This is nothing," they shouted. "Vorik has already won." But then the smell began to spread. A warm, rich aroma rolled across the arena like an invisible wave. It wrapped around the aliens in the seats, sliding into their noses, their lungs, their hearts. Some shifted uncomfortably, others leaned forward without realizing. Vorik sneered, adding more glowing liquids to his machine. Bright sparks flew as steam hissed into the air. His dish looked like a painting of stars, glowing with unnatural beauty. But when he lifted a spoon to taste, his face stayed cold. It was perfect, yes, but empty. Meanwhile, Daniel poured soup into a simple bowl. The smell alone made eyes water. The sound of bubbling broth echoed like a heartbeat. He placed the bowl down, not with pride, but with respect. The judges, 3 aliens of different species, stepped forward. They tasted Vorik's dish first. They nodded, frowning in concentration. "Yes, this is perfect balance," one said. "Yes, this is flawless texture," another agreed. But their voices were flat, their eyes dull. Then they tasted Daniel's soup. The first judge, an insectoid with hard armor, took a sip and froze. Its antennae trembled, and for the first time in its life, a tear rolled down its shell. This tastes like love," it whispered. The second judge, a reptilian war veteran, tasted. He dropped the spot. Un clutched his chest and began to laugh. "I remember my mother's cooking," he said, voice breaking. "I thought I had forgotten her face. But now, I see her again." The third judge, a telepath who had not spoken aloud in years, tasted and whispered with its real voice. "This food makes me feel alive." The hall erupted into chaos. Aliens shouted, cried, laughed, some even fell to their knees. Vorik's glowing dish sat untouched, forgotten. No one cared for perfection anymore. They cared for the warmth in their hearts. Vorik roared in anger, slamming his fists against the machine. "This is trickery," he shouted. "This human is poisoning you with weakness." But the crowd turned on him. "Silence," they roared. "You cannot taste what we taste. You cannot feel what we feel." Daniel stood quietly, wiping his hands. He did not celebrate. He did not mock Vorik. He only bowed his head slightly and said, "Cooking is not about power. It is about giving." But even as the hall filled with cheers for the quiet human, dangerous eyes watched from above. Hidden cameras recorded every tear, every laugh, every trembling heart. And far away, leaders watched the duel in silence. "This is worse than we thought," one whispered. "If one human can shake the galaxy with food, imagine what else they are hiding." And so, as Daniel walked out of the arena surrounded by cheers, he did not know that his victory had also sealed his fate. The galaxy now feared him more than ever, and the storm was ready to break. The duel was over. Daniel had won. But instead of peace, his victory lit a fire across the galaxy. Every news channel replayed the images. Judges crying, warriors laughing, entire crowds shaking from a simple bowl of soup. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy saw food not as fuel, but as something far greater. And for the first time in centuries, rulers felt afraid. Meetings were held in secret chambers. Holograms of leaders glowed in the dark as they spoke in sharp whispers. "This human's cooking stirs rebellion," one declared. "He can move armies with a single meal," another warned. "We must control him, or destroy him," a third hissed. But the people did not know of these meetings. They only knew that Daniel's food gave them hope. Lines grew longer at the broken restaurant. Aliens from distant worlds traveled just to taste a spoonful of his cooking. Children brought their parents, soldiers brought their wounded, and merchants brought their weary workers. Each one left changed. Each one carried the story further, and so the leaders acted. Spies crept into the shadows of the station, watching Daniel's every move. Assassins sharpened their blades, waiting for the order. Agents approached him at night, offering riches, ships, even entire planets if he would cook only for their race. One guild master, a creature made of smoke and shadow, cornered him in a quiet alley. Its voice curled like poison. "Human, your food is gold, but gold must be owned. Join us. Cook for us alone. Refuse, and you may not live long." Daniel listened quietly, his eyes calm. Then he shook his head. "I cook for everyone," he said softly. The shadow hissed, its form twisting in anger. "You are a fool. The galaxy will eat you alive." Still, Daniel walked away. But threats soon turned into action. One evening, as Daniel stirred a pot of soup for children, an explosion rocked the restaurant. Flames burst through the air, smoke filled the hall, and screams rose from the crowd. The attackers fled before security could catch them. Dozens were hurt. Bowls shattered on the floor. Yet even through the smoke, Daniel dragged survivors to safety, his own hands burned, but he carried on until every child was safe. When asked later why he did not run, Daniel only said, "Because they were hungry." The attack only made the people love him more. Aliens from all species began to defend him, forming groups called the Way of Flavor, they say. Wore loyalty not to a flag or empire, but to the human cook. They stood guard outside his little restaurant. Merchants gave him free supplies. Children sang songs about him in the streets. And the whispers grew louder. The human's food can unite us. That was the moment rulers truly panicked. Armies could not unite the galaxy. Politics could not unite it. But this human's cooking was doing what weapons never could. The council chambers shook with anger. "This is rebellion," they roared. "Control him now, before it is too late." And so the orders were given. Ships were sent, not with gifts, but with chains. Troops landed on the station, surrounding the market. Announcements boomed through speakers. By order of the Galactic Council, the human known as Daniel is to be taken for protection. Cooperation is required. The crowd froze. Aliens turned their heads toward the restaurant. Daniel stood inside, holding a wooden spoon, looking at the soldiers. The people's hearts beat like drums. Then a child's voice shouted from the crowd, "No, don't take him." Others joined in. "You can't have him. He belongs to us all. Leave the human alone." In moments, hundreds of aliens stood between the soldiers and Daniel, feathered, scaled, furred, crystal-skinned. All stood together. They were different in body, but united in one thing, the taste of hope. The soldiers hesitated, their weapons shaking. They had never seen such unity before. One of them whispered, "If food can do this, what else can it do?" From the shadows, spies watched and sent their reports. "The people will not give him up willingly. Taking him by force could start riots, even war. But if we cannot destroy him, we must find another way to own him." Above the station, warships circled like vultures. Inside them, powerful voices plotted, "We will not stop. If he refuses chains of gold, then we will forge chains of iron. The human will cook for us, or he will not cook at all." And down below, in the quiet of his small kitchen, Daniel stirred another pot. The smell drifted through the air, soft and warm. Children laughed outside, guards stood watch, and aliens whispered of peace. But Daniel's eyes were heavy. He knew the truth. The galaxy was not done with him. This was no longer about food. This was war. The galaxy had reached a breaking point. Daniel's cooking had become more than taste, more than art, more than memory. It had become a force that united strangers, broke walls, and lit flames in hearts that had been cold for centuries, and the rulers could not ignore it any longer. At last, the order was given. The human cook was summoned to the Galactic Council, not as a guest, but as a trial. There, before the most powerful leaders in existence, he would cook one final meal. If his food was judged a danger, he would never be allowed to cook again. If it was judged a gift, then the galaxy itself would change. The journey to the council was silent. Daniel walked through halls lined with armored soldiers, past eyes that glared with suspicion. Behind him followed whispers of the crowd. Will they destroy him? Will they honor him? No one knew. At the heart of the council chamber stood a table like no other, a circle so vast it could seat rulers from 1,000 worlds. Golden thrones shimmered in the light, and every seat was filled. The air itself felt heavy. This was not just a hall. It was the weight of power itself. The high speaker, a being of pure light, raised its glowing hand. "Human," it said, its voice echoing like thunder. "You stand accused of spreading chaos. Your cooking stirs rebellion, armies tremble, leaders fear. Yet, the people call you savior." The chamber buzzed with murmurs. The high speaker continued, "Tonight, you will cook one meal for us all. If your food brings only danger, you will be silenced. If it brings peace, then the galaxy shall decide." Daniel bowed his head. "I will cook," he said softly. He was led to the center, where a small kitchen had been prepared. No machines, only raw ingredients, flames, knives, and bowls. On the long table lay food from every corner of the galaxy. Glowing fruits from the twin suns, crystal grain from frozen moons, spices that burned like fire, roots that sang when cut. Daniel looked at them and smiled faintly. He saw not power, not politics, not fear, only the gift of life. And so he began. The fire lit, blue and steady. The sound of sizzling echoed through the chamber. The smell rose, slow at first, then stronger, wrapping around the seats of kings and queens, generals and prophets. At first, the rulers sat stiff, their faces cold, but as the minutes passed, their bodies softened, their eyes flickered. Daniel worked quietly, his movements graceful, every cut, every stir carried patience. He combined foods from enemies' worlds, mixing them with care, spices from one empire blended with roots from another, fruits from rival planets cooked together in the same pan. The meal itself became a symbol. It was no longer just food, it was unity. The rulers began to shift in their seats. A reptilian warlord leaned forward, sniffing the air. A feathered queen tilted her head, her sharp eyes narrowing in wonder. Even the high speaker's glowing body trembled slightly, as if the smell reached into its very light. At last, the food was served. Simple bowls and plates were placed before the galaxy's most powerful. Steam curled into the air like soft music. Daniel stepped back and said only one word: eat. The first to taste was a warlord who had fought battles for 200 years. His claws gripped the spoon tightly. He took a bite and dropped the spoon. His chest shook as laughter burst from him. I remember my brother, he said, eyes wide. We fought as children, and I had forgotten his face. But now, it is clear again. The second was a queen whose empire stretched across 100 stars. She tasted slowly, carefully, then tears ran down her feather. It's my nest, she whispered. The smell of my nest when I was young. I thought it lost forever. One by one they ate, one by one they changed. A prophet who claimed to hear God suddenly laughed like a child. A general who had not shown emotion in decades cried openly. A ruler who had sworn endless hatred against his enemies turned to his rival and whispered, I forgive you. The chamber, once cold and heavy, became filled with warmth, laughter, tears. Whispers of love and memory echoed through the vast hall. For a moment, the galaxy's rulers were not kings, not queens, not generals. They were simply people. People with hearts. People with forgotten dreams. People who remembered what it meant to be alive. But not all accepted it. In the shadows, some rulers clenched their fists, their teeth grinding. This is dangerous, one growled. If food can change us like this, it can enslave us. Another hissed. This human must not live. He cannot be allowed to hold such power. And yet, when they looked at the faces of those around them, rulers smiling, rivals embracing, old enemies forgiving, they realized the truth. The galaxy itself was shifting. Daniel stood quietly, his head bowed. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He only whispered, This is food. This is what it was always meant to be. The chamber fell silent, and then, slowly, applause began. It grew louder and louder, until the walls shook with it. The high speaker raised its hand once more. The human has spoken not with words, but with flavor. His cooking is not chaos. It is hope. But far away, deep in the dark, ships gathered. Not everyone believed, not everyone accepted. For some, the banquet had proven only one thing. The human's power was real, and power like that must be controlled. The banquet was over. The galaxy's rulers had tasted human cooking. They had laughed, they had cried, they had remembered things long buried. For one night, the chamber of power was not filled with politics and threats, but with warmth and peace. And at the center of it all was Daniel, the quiet human. News of the banquet spread faster than light. On distant worlds, people whispered. The council cried. The warlords forgave their enemies. The human showed them who we are. It was the first time in living memory that the galaxy believed change was possible. But while many celebrated, others still feared. In secret, agents continued to whisper. He can unite armies with his meals. He can turn enemies into allies. This is too much power for one man. And so the struggle did not end. It only transformed. Yet Daniel did not care for power. He returned to his small kitchen on the station, the same broken restaurant where it had all begun. Crowds still came, lining up every day. Children tugged at his sleeves, elders thanked him, warriors bowed to him. But Daniel never raised his head in pride. He only cooked, quietly, for to him it was never about fame. It was always about care. Still, the galaxy had changed. New schools were opened, culinary academies of the human way. They taught not machines but hands, fire, and patience. Students from every species learned the art of flavor. For the first time in centuries, cooking became a culture again, no longer just for survival, but for memory, for love, for peace, and humanity, once ignored and dismissed, was seen with new eyes. No longer were humans called weak or unimportant. They were called the keepers of flavor, the reminders of the soul. Other species who once mocked them now looked with respect, even awe. But Daniel himself never claimed the title of hero. He never built an empire, never sat on a throne. He kept cooking in his little corner. Even as leaders tried to offer him palaces, ships, and crowns, he refused. "I am just a cook," he would say softly. Yet legends grew around him. Stories spread of his meals healing sadness, of his soup ending wars, of his bread giving courage to armies. Some tales were true, some were not, but all carried the same message. The human changed us. Still, in the dark corners of the galaxy, not all were at peace. Warlords who had tasted his food and feared its power sharpened their blades again. Spies searched for recipes, hoping to steal the secret. Religions argued, claiming his food was either a holy gift or a dangerous temptation. The galaxy was united in wonder, but also divided in fear. One night, as Daniel cleaned his kitchen, an old alien visited him. Its body was bent with age, its eyes dim but kind. It sat at the table and whispered, "You have changed us, human. But do you know what frightens me most?" Daniel looked up, silent. The alien leaned closer. "If food can do this, what else can your people do?" Daniel did not answer. He only placed a bowl of soup before the elder. The alien smiled faintly and ate. And for a moment, the fear was replaced with peace. And so Daniel's legacy was not in words, not in weapons, not in laws. It was in flavor. It was in the way people remembered home when they ate. It was in the way enemies forgave. It was in the way children laughed when they tasted something warm. Generations later, when Daniel was long gone, his name was still spoken. His story became myth. The quiet human who stood against empires with nothing but a spoon. The cook who changed the galaxy, not with war, but with love hidden in flavor. And across the stars, whenever a young student picked up a knife for the first time, whenever a flame was lit in a kitchen, whenever a soup was stirred with care, they whispered the same, words. Words that had once made the galaxy laugh, but now made it bow in respect. I can cook. The galaxy never looked at humans the same way again, not as weak, not as forgettable, but as something far more dangerous, far more powerful, not because of weapons or armies, but because of the quiet strength to touch the soul. And in the silence of the stars, as ships traveled and empires rose and fell, one question remained, echoing through time. If one human's cooking could shake the galaxy, what other secrets might humanity still be hiding?